All right, welcome. We have a lot on the agenda today. So we are going to be covering a new ZEIP process proposal, as well as a handful of features that have been implemented at the smart contract level over the last month or so. And then we will discuss some updates to Mesh, the ZeroX API roadmap, and then finally we will end with an ecosystem spotlight for Zerion.
Let's get started.
So to get started, in the last meeting, we sent out a survey to get feedback on the structure of this meeting. If you have a chance, please take the time to fill this survey out. It is very valuable to us, and we're always looking for new ways to improve this meeting.
All right, I can take that. All right, guys. If you recall, last ecosystem update, we shared our roadmap, short-term roadmap of updating basically the way that we, as a community, govern the ZeroX protocol. And we are happy to basically propose a new ZEIP process. One of the areas that we identified as basically something that we could do a better job on. So there's a ZEIP out there actually about this ZEIP process that we would like collect feedback on before we put it up for a vote. So what I was hoping to do today was basically going through the biggest changes with you and maybe take any questions you might have. So the biggest things that are changing here are the fact that we're gonna tag basically ZEIPs based on type. I'm gonna go through those. There are 4 types: core, non-core, parameters, and operations. Core is, if you want, the type that represents the most classical type of ZEIPs, meaning changes in the smart contracts that really regulate the way that the exchange works today. If you want, the V3 update was a core type of ZEIP, or a macro ZEIP, if you want. But we also realized that there are portions of smart contract codes and potentially off-chain code that interact with these contracts, but are not necessarily basically they do not introduce the need for a big upgrade of the system, but rather they introduce new functionalities with which you interact with the exchange contracts. And that is going to basically fall under this bucket of non-core ZEIPs. Parameters is the most lightweight in terms of approval and governance in a way, because those are simple parameters that you could set up pretty easily and flexibly on the system. An example of that would be the recent V3 token economics parameters, such as the epoch length for the staking pools, or specific parameters of the formula with which we give rewards back to staking pools, or the protocol fee multiplier, for example. Those would fall under that parameter. And finally, there's another type called operations. It's more about rollout of new upgrades, for example. We had a few such examples in the past where, for example, we were waiting for the V3 deployment to happen, or we postponed it due to certain findings that we had in the audit. So those could be ZEIPs that the community could basically raise as changes in the way that we run the operations, the operational details of the deployment of the contracts. At any point, feel free to interrupt and ask questions to clarify these things, or over also the comments. We're able to tackle them. Another thing that we're going to introduce is a new template. So anytime that you basically want to create a new proposal, you'll be able to follow that template, and hopefully we'll make it simpler for you to use it. Also, we acknowledged also that we probably didn't do a very good job as a ZeroX core team to clarify this process, but also to maintain a high quality list of ZEIPs. Right now, the list is like has tens of ZIPs that are open. That it's not super clear if they are abandoned or not. And what we're gonna be doing basically is to spend more time on making sure that that list is curated. And with that, we'll also are gonna introduce tags that basically will better detail what stage of ZIP is, and also ask for more details if there's, we feel there's need for that from, for the community. And again, yes, the purpose of this ZIP, where there is all the process, basically all the details, is to put it up for vote in a couple of weeks' time. Again, to reiterate, I want to make sure that it's super clear for those in the call and for those that are going to watch the video. For those that do not know, what is a ZEIP? A ZEIP is basically, we took inspiration from the Ethereum improvement proposals, and we created a 0x improvement proposals. So basically, those are public proposals to change the behavior of the 0x pipeline on smart contracts. So basically, it could, again, involve really the core part of the peer-to-peer exchange, but also could include certain portions of smart contracts and off-chain code that interacts with these contracts. There are some guidelines on how to make this process high quality. We want anyone that we would like anyone to basically propose as a ZIP, not only to describe clearly the problem that they think is important to solve, but as much as possible go into the details of what part of the code they think should be changed. And that doesn't need to happen necessarily when the ZIP is shared, but we don't want to have a list of ZIPs that simply basically describe the problem, but as much as possible, we want to engage in a discussion where we also go closer to an implementation detail. Also, we're a community-driven project. There's obviously the 0x team, core team that is specifically designated on making progress on the protocol, but we want anyone to be like proposing changes, but also signing up for making those changes happen. So also as part of this new process, we want to make sure that it's clearly called out who's going to be the designated team before jumping on implementation. Now, we expect most of the time that designated team to be 0x core team, but we feel like that by calling that out, will basically help on the future governance of the protocol that is shared, intended to be shared. Just a quick walkthrough of how the different phases will look like in the new process. We start top left. There are basically two states where it can be open or closed. And once it's open, as just more details, the better in terms of a problem to be solved and implementation that hopefully will increase in clarity as the discussion goes on. And then there's a moment where basically there's a team that says, yes, we're ready to work on this. If there's need for an audit, we will need basically a team that signs up and become a sponsor for that audit. Historically, in the past, there's always been the 0x core team, and most probably it's going to be for the short term. But we want to have that called out. Once that is accepted, we are going to be introducing basically a poll phase where basically we'll ask the community whether they think this is something that should be worked on. That's pre-implementation. That's the important difference here. So in that phase, basically, the implementation details or the speccing will be clear, but implementation has not started yet. So we will ask the community, hey, do you think that designated team should work on this or not? That doesn't apply to all types of ZIPs. It actually applies mostly for the core type. Now, if the poll passes, there will be basically the implementation that will be also shared in the ZIP as the implementation work goes on. And then finally, there's the classic flow where there's the audit, and then there's the final executive vote for the community on contracts that have been written. Now, on the closed side, well, obviously, if everything goes smoothly and it's implemented and deployed and there's an upgrade to the contracts, that ZEIP gets closed, implemented. At any point in time, especially on the first phases, a ZEIP can be basically tagged as superseded or abandoned, that depending on whether there are basically overlaps on ZEIPs, or simply there hasn't been any engagement for a long time. And on the vote side, obviously, if the vote is a no, that ZEIP will be basically tagged as rejected. Questions? In terms of timelines, well, again, here's the link. This is ZEIP 76. All the details that I shared very briefly now are in that ZEIP. Please share any feedback. This is like a very important step for us. It's not going to be perfect at first, probably, but we are eager to basically iterate on this. And our primary goal here is to make sure that you guys feel like you have your voice will be heard by the community, obviously by ZeroX core team primarily, but also we want to encourage a protocol that is community driven from a development perspective. And we're targeting end of February for putting this to an executive vote. Obviously, this is a type operations, if that makes sense, of ZEIP. So that doesn't need a poll or whatever, because there's no implementation. One on the smart contracts level. Once this is basically voted on, we'll start cleaning up the queue and start adopting this process from now on.
Just want to add, our main reasons for trying to revamp this process are to bring more transparency into the process and also just more structure around, how a ZEIP goes from an idea to an actual implementation in the protocol. These are kind of the pain points that we have heard from people. But if you have any other pain points in the process that you don't feel are addressed by the ZEIP, or there's anything you don't like at all about it, like please, we encourage you to leave feedback in the ZEIP itself.
All right, moving on to a few updates on the protocol level.
Cool. So I guess before we jump into the slide, did anyone have any questions or comments on the ZEIP proposal? Good. Cool. So over the last month, we implemented a new extension contract that allows for property-based orders to be created. So I forget which ZEIP number this is, but at a high level, this allows users to create their own validator smart contract that just checks arbitrary properties of a non-fungible token, and they can kind of plug in this validator contract to this new broker extension contract in order to create property-based orders. So the initial use case for this is allowing buy orders to be created for Gods Unchained cards. So the issue with Gods Unchained cards right now is, you can have two of the same card, but they are completely different token IDs. So it's difficult to create a buy order for a specific card for that reason, because you don't know which ID the seller is going to own. So, instead you could create an order that says, we just want to buy any, Gods Unchained 721 token that has this specific proto, I believe is referred to. And yeah, David from Token Trove just said they just pushed this update. So really excited to see that out in the wild. But yeah, I think this is the initial use case for property-based orders, but this specific extension contract is actually much more generic than that, and you can use this for any arbitrary properties for 721 tokens. We actually, let me Move to the next slide.
Yeah. 75.
Yeah, so this is kind of the architecture for the whole thing. So the broker extension contract is the entry point, and the property validator contracts are specific to each property that you want to define. And it works fairly similarly to the forwarder contract. The difference being that you do need to set an allowance to this broker contract, so that when you fill the order, it can actually pull in your 721 tokens, verify the properties, and then make the trade. If you are interested in building anything else on this, I would check out the spec. So we create a new directory in our specifications repo called order types, where there will be a handful of new order types added to that as they are rolled out. So this is the second order type that we implemented over the last month. So there's now a way to create stop limit orders on 0x using Chainlink oracles. So this is a fairly simple extension contract that uses the static call proxy. So you fill these orders as normal through the exchange contract. The UX is exactly the same as a regular 0x order. The difference is that at the time an order is settled, it will make a static call to the Chainlink oracles and verify that the on-chain price kind of matches what was specified in the order. So, let's say I am long Ether right now, and I want to get stopped out if the price goes below $230 or something like that. I can specify in the order that it can only be filled, when the price reaches $231 or something like that. But the order itself would specify $230. So there's a very slight spread between the on-chain oracle and what's specified in the order. So this spread creates an incentive for people to fill these orders and execute the stop on your behalf, because they are essentially scooping up some arbitrage. It's a fairly simple smart contract. It can be extended to any other on-chain oracles. Just please don't use the swap. Check it out, and also think that this could be an interesting monetization opportunity for relayers. These orders can just be hosted through a regular relayer who's storing them on their backend and filling them as they become executable. There are a couple different ways to ensure that these orders are actually executable. So you can kind of pull the orders and make repeated calls to check if they're fillable, or you can monitor events for like the specific Chainlink contract events. And when you see those the prices being updated to the correct levels, you can go and fill the corresponding orders. And we also added a specification for this in the same order types directory. So we have talked about these bridges in the past. The Chai bridge allows anyone who holds DAI to earn interest while they're providing liquidity. And they do this by storing their DAI in the Chai contract, which kind of just automatically locks up your DAI, and you'll earn the DAI savings rate. However, when someone fills this order, they will just receive regular DAI instead of Chai. So I don't actually know what the DAI savings rate is right now, but I believe it's about 7%. Fairly straightforward to use. If you are a relayer and you want to mix Chai orders with your regular DAI order book, You'll just need to make 2 different SRA queries and sort the order books. But they can be mixed fairly easily for the most part. As a taker filling one of these orders, the user experience is going to be exactly the same, but there will be slight differences in gas costs. I believe the Chai Bridge orders cost about 120,000 more gas, if I remember correctly. The dYdX bridge is a bit more complicated. So this allows, well, for 2 use cases. One is similar to the Chai bridge. So you can earn interest on either your DAI or USDC or Ether while you're providing liquidity using the dYdX contracts. However, this also allows you to create margin limit orders. So rather than only lending out assets as you're providing liquidity, you can also borrow assets as you're providing liquidity. So if you don't want exposure to Ether, for example, and you're just holding on to USDC, that could just be your collateral, and you can just borrow Ether and initiate short positions every time you are selling it as your order circle. So both of these contracts are out. Chai Bridge is a bit further along with regards to the rest of our tooling. So it is already supported in Mesh. dYdX Bridge is not yet supported in Mesh, but should be coming soon. And then we will be adding support for both of these into the ZeroX API swap quote endpoint. But again, if you are a relayer and want to kind of mix these into your regular order books, there will be a little bit more work. And yeah, if you're interested in that, please reach out to us and we can guide you through the process. We will be creating more documentation on these as we go.
We'll have the specs in the same folder.
Yes, all the specs will be in this order types directory of the specifications repo.
Right. Okay. Now on to an update around Mesh. So this is a pretty interesting release that is going to happen this week. I'm going to spend some time in the basically things that we're adding. But the most important thing to note here, guys, is that this is a breaking network level change, meaning that the networks will be actually different from each other. So our ask to all the ecosystem players and users of Meshnode is to please upgrade as soon as we have the new version out. We're gonna be basically sharing everything in the normal channels. But yeah, please upgrade so then we make sure that the liquidity and the network is up and running and migrated successfully. So I think there was a question around the third point, the HTTP JSON RPC support. We haven't really prioritized the HTTPS part right now, but I will try to get maybe more details on that and maybe update the slides with our latest thinking around there. Another thing that we have added is the topics support. There's a slide, the next slide is around that. But also something pretty exciting is that we basically created a new way of sharing orders that is going to be effective from Mesh, basically the first version onwards, and is basically going to help with basically the bandwidth usage of the old orders. So this is obviously a very promising number, but we expect the sharing speed of the old orders to increase significantly with the new version. And as we mentioned, the Chai Bridge order types are already supported in this version. The dYdX ones will basically follow shortly. I think there was a question, but let's see if I can see the question quickly.
I can read it for you. It's how can we launch this in production without HTTPS?
Meaning that you feel that we cannot launch it without HTTPS, or maybe I don't get the question completely.
Is this?
Yeah, Augur was having the same problem from what I heard, which is that once you, if you don't have WSS support versus like just WebSocket support, you can't run it over HTTPS.
Yeah.
Is this specifically a concern when running it in browser?
Yes. No, well, actually, no, it's when communicating with a mesh node. I would imagine it would happen in both cases, but for my particular case, I'm running a mesh node on DigitalOcean, and it's not able to talk to my front end without WSS because it gets to mix content.
I forgot how we solved the problem for Augur, so I don't have an answer for you right now, but what I can do is, Lauren, I'll reach out to you and I'll make sure that.
Yeah, I was told that there was that it was coming in 9.0, so I didn't bother with the documentation around, or there wasn't really documentation, but I would love if there was some kind of doc you could point me at to run it for now without that.
Noted. And I'll make sure that also we'll update this slide as well if we have more pointers to that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for asking this.
I believe you can also run your own copy of ZeroX API, which will kind of wrap mesh in HTTPS if you're just communicating with the API and not the mesh node directly. But yeah, I get that that's probably a bit more work.
Yeah, I was just trying to eliminate, like, just deduplicate the effort because it seems like a temporary band-aid. So I'm just looking for the quickest thing.
Yeah, I'll get back to you and the rest of the people. I'll update the slides as well.
Thanks.
Any other questions around these? I'll spend a couple of minutes on the topic support. So what that is basically we're gonna add a way for participants of both on the maker and the taker side to subscribe to almost sub networks of type of orders. So basically we'll be able to add a pattern that will basically perform almost as a mask or a sub mask that basically will let you basically pull only orders that are of a specific type. And anyone can actually create these patterns too. So then that should help with bandwidth and the propagation speed of orders if the use case that you focused on is very specific. And an example of that is actually the Augur orders. We are going to basically using a specific pattern. I believe there was a question around roadmap items for mesh. So we wanted to basically add some more clarity here. And we wanted to make sure that it was clear that our primary focus in Q1 was really working on performance that we identified as being the least kind of appealing in our mind. And more specifically, we wanted to improve bandwidth, order propagation speed, and emissional events. We did, with the V9 release, we think we have made a good progress for the first two, which are actually pretty entangled. But also what was pretty interesting is that as we were working on these three items, we learned that, hey, we need actually some sort of a simulation environment where we can test out our assumptions without having to push a release and then see what happens. So we've been working hard on that too. We've been building basically a sort of we call it mesh manager, where we're able to basically spin up a few nodes and test out the code that we're working on, and also identify what are the next items that we need to focus on in terms of performance. We started also working on the other two items that you see on the bottom. We started investigating spam prevention designs. It's pretty early stages right now to share anything really. And also, I believe this was asked in the agenda. We started looking at actually improving the querying functionalities that currently exist in Mesh, which are very limited. Right now, you just get all the orders. Obviously, there is now the topic support, but we want to also make it easier and more flexible for those that run a Mesh orders to just query orders. Most probably, we're gonna focus first on maker asset data and taker asset data, but we're also interested in knowing whether there are specific queries that you would find useful here. And that's for our immediate short-term roadmap. All right, I think the next item is the ZeroX API, and I also want to make sure, guys, that ZeroX API and Mesh roadmaps are really tightly intertwined, as you know. So we're also working on basically helping out on that side too, so that we make it as easy as possible to consume the best liquidity out there. And that's a good segue to Rubia. I can spend some time on ZeroX API.
Yeah, so some news for ZeroX API. First, we added on Saturday the Corp F5 bridge that's now live. With that, we have our sourcing liquidity from 5 different sources, including Mesh, Kyber, Uniswap, and Oasis. We are already anecdotally started seeing that for example, stablecoin pairs like USDC DAI, we have seen that compared to Coinbase Pro, we can offer 20 basis points better prices for 20K and 70K orders. So that's really great for the ecosystem, and we're very excited about. Also, I wanted to share a little bit more about what we will be working on for Q1. So we are working on scoping out affiliate fees and monetization paths for relayers and dApp developers. Anyone is interested in taking a look at what we have so far and providing feedback, please ping me on Discord. You can find me as Phobia1303. We're also going to be working on improving the smart order routing logic. That it's kind of like a twofold approach. So on one end, we are working on improving the on-chain routing. And then on the other end, we're working on path finding. There are different things, but it all is to improve our smart order routing logic. We will be working to support the lending protocol bridges that Amir explained earlier, so dYdX bridge and the Chai bridge. And also, I don't know if you all saw, but we made an announcement last week. We deprecated officially the LaunchKit backend. So instead, you can use the ZeroX API repo. If you don't know where to find me, I can send you the link. Otherwise, you can find the announcement on the LaunchKit Discord channel as well. Yeah. Any questions about the API roadmap before we move on to our ecosystem showcase? All right. Well, just quick intro to Zerion. Zerion is one of the teams that is using the ZeroX API to source liquidity to offer basically the swap functionality in their product. But I'll let Alexei tell us more about it.
Yes, hey everyone, Alex from Zerion is here. So I'll try to present my screen. Hopefully that works. I guess that will be easier to demo case. Just give me a second. All right. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So we just recently integrated ZeroX API, and we are super excited that we are finally able to let our users to trade and source liquidity from multiple places, because until now we've been supporting only Uniswap. So right now it's available in our dev domain, but we are planning to go live with this feature within the next, I think I will say like 12 hours. So it should be in production literally tonight. And so basically we just integrated it in our exchange flow. We didn't change much the design, but basically now under the hood we are connected to ZeroX API, so you can choose what you're going to pay with. And if you are paying with something outside of ETH, you'll need to enable the token first, but I guess for simplicity I'll just use ETH to purchase, let's say, I don't know, like some 0x tokens. And I'll need to enter the amount here. And after that, we also show how the trade is going to be split across the 5 supported sources, and also the exchange rate is here, and we automatically update it every, I believe, 10 or 15 seconds to make sure that the user doesn't need to reload the page and always sees the actual rate. And also we hide the fee here, so like for curious people, we also show like what the 0x protocol fee and what the expected Ethereum network fee is going to be. And from here, like the flow is super simple. Whatever I use as my provider, so I connected my wallet as MetaMask. I'll just click exchange, approve my transaction, and it's gonna appear in our history. It's also nicely displayed here, and once it's confirmed, it's also going to be represented in my total portfolio, but I'm not sure. I guess we don't need to wait until that. So yeah, that's basically about it. That was super simple and super exciting that now in exactly the same UX we can actually source liquidity from multiple places. I think it's a really nice thing, and it's going to be helpful for our users.
Awesome. That was a real mainnet transaction, huh?
Yeah, so that's actually already confirmed, so that was it.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexei.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. How did you find working with the ZeroX API? Were there any quirks with it? Was it easy? Do you have any feedback for us?
I mean, I feel like it was pretty easy, and it's also super nice that you guys have been pretty responsive to like whatever features we needed. Like we needed and like information, like to know like how exactly the order is going to be split, and it was added recently, which is super convenient because now we are able to actually show to users where exactly their trade is going to go to. So that's been pretty nice. I think the experience was pretty good. Don't have much to add.
Thank you. We haven't actually documented that,
Okay.
but you already implemented, so it was great to see that you implemented it before we documented it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like how you also made it super clear to the user where not only obviously the split across the different liquidity sources is great. I also really like the fees. You really make it transparent for the user to understand which one is the Ethereum gas and which other component is actually 0x protocol fee. I think that's a great step forward. Transparency. I think it's very good. Potential hurdles there are always like around the changes of the gas price. If the user decides to potentially increase the gas price, how are you going to tackle that? Have you thought of that at all?
Well, I don't think that's really possible because user can always change the gas price later in their like provider, let's say MetaMask, so we can't really affect that. But we just like use the average estimation, the default that we use, but we can't stop users from changing it.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. But maybe I was thinking of, I think 1inch is using a disclaimer on, hey, be aware, educating the user on, hey, if you are increasing the gas price, there are chances that this could revert. Maybe it's something that to be considered.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point to keep in mind. Thank you.
But that looks very good, very sleek, the UI.
Cool. Well, I think that is all we have on the agenda. Did anyone have any questions about anything? Yes, Michael.
Yeah. Hey guys, this is Mike from Hummingbot. I wanted to also take the chance to introduce our new engineer, Kieran, to everyone. This is Kieran right here. Kieran worked on the V3 upgrade for Radar recently, so we'll have that in the next release. Actually, my question was more around, I guess, from the perspective of makers, both our users as well as other market makers in the community. how should we prioritize like integration with like mesh versus an individual relayer like Radar or Bamboo? And in terms of like, I think right now we've kind of done integration to mesh as well as we're maintaining our current Bamboo integration. I think one thing we found is the mesh order book is, I guess, different from the Bamboo order book. And so I guess I think one thing less some clarification on is kind of like how should we kind of like think about our integrations in terms of like which one is kind of like ZeroX kind of how is ZeroX like? I guess think about how do you think about like layer versus mesh like relationship? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Specifically when comparing Bamboo's order book to Mesh's, I'm assuming you mean Bamboo had more orders than Mesh?
Yeah, so I think right now it just seems different. So we haven't kind of like identified whether one's like more or less. It's just I think like we're kind of trying to figure out like number one, I guess what accounts for the differences, and also maybe like longer term, like if we're looking like 1 or 2 quarters down the road, maybe because it takes a lot of time to like build and maintain that integration. Where should makers be looking toward in terms of like the primary point of integration?
So, sorry, just to clarify a little bit more, you're talking about makers posting orders more so than reading orders?
Correct.
So,
well, ideally both, I guess both, but I would say it's easier to read at this point. Posting, I think, is a little bit, well, I mean, like, I think you need to do both, but I would say, I think posting is a little bit more, it seems like it's a little more nascent right now. It's kind of our view, but.
I think in an ideal world, you post your orders to Mesh and then they're propagated to all of the relayers. And that should be like the easiest kind of single integration point. But if you're reading orders, I think there always will be differences between relayers and Mesh, just because relayers are always going to have their own proprietary liquidity as well. So assuming that they are integrating with Mesh, it will be kind of a superset. So I guess it kind of depends on your bandwidth, right? Like obviously it would be nice to be able to integrate everything, but other than that, probably depends where it is.
I see. So maybe to clarify, do you mean like Mesh is kind of like the core like shared order, like set of orders between all the relayers, but all the relayers may add like their own set of orders alongside the Mesh orders? Is that kind of like the way that we should be thinking about it?
Yes. I mean, in an ideal world, relayers would be pulling orders from Mesh, and for any proprietary orders that they get, they will also put those into Mesh as well. So they're, if that is the case, then you really only need to integrate Mesh because it should be constantly up to date. I mean, there are always going to be like, propagation differences and stuff like that, which could create small consistencies in the order books. But yeah, I would say in the long run, I'm guessing that mostly everything will be in Mesh. That's not as true for, like Bamboo using the coordinator, for example, like those orders aren't able to be easily supported in Mesh at the moment. So yeah, it could be worth integrating both.
Okay. Yeah, that's quite helpful, actually. Thanks for the clarification. I think Josh also just posted a comment.
In trouble. I'm sure I'll just. Can anyone read the comment from Joshua? Do you have it handy?
Yeah, I can just say it. I was just going to say that, yeah, the coordinated orders don't fit into Mesh. So those are kind of siloed off. But at the same time, I wrote a bridge for ETH to DAI that just is based on order ID, and those obviously also don't fit into mesh. So there'll probably always be more orders on Bamboo Relay. I mean, the other thing as well is like the Uniswap and Kyber like swap orders kind of only exist like in a temporal form anyway. So issues around like what is the best market price for something at any given time. You can't even really just pull from mesh to know that. You kind of have to pull from, I guess, the 0x API at the moment to kind of determine that.
Yeah, I think if you're taking liquidity, 0x API swap code endpoint is probably where you're going to get the best prices. If you're posting liquidity, I think probably the best place to do that is to mesh or somewhere that's connected to mesh, so that it propagates throughout all of the layers.
Okay.
Mesh, in a way, we built Mesh for to create this peer-to-peer unstoppable network as the principal highway of liquidity to connect makers and takers. Now we released 0x API as, in a way, almost an abstraction layer on top of that distribution of liquidity to make it super simple for taker teams or developers to access that liquidity. Obviously, as we said, there could be proprietary liquidity that lives in these relayers or dApps. Our objective on the roadmap is really making sure that all of that open order book liquidity is supported throughout these big highways to connect basically makers, so that in order to simplify the experience on the maker side as well. So that really should be less and less incentive to manage multiple points at the same time, because there's one place where your liquidity is distributed basically everywhere. That's why we built this, in order to make it easier to connect markets.
Cool. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you for the time, everyone, and it was great seeing most of you at Zero Expo. Yeah, hope you all had a good time.